Hey, how's it going? This is Melinda and welcome to my channel. Today I want to discuss with you records that have left a huge impact. They rocked our worlds, they changed the culture, they sold a gazillion records, and some have aged better than others. And I'm going to show some records that are in my collection that I really still love, I think are stone cold classics, and others, not so much. So, we're probably going to disagree, and that's okay. If you're not a subscriber to my channel, please subscribe. I would really appreciate your support. I am going to start out with one that I think is the gold standard, and I am going to show my last record as being the biggest cultural phenomenon, the one that rocked the world the most, and there's never going to be anything else like it. So let me go ahead and start with the first one, the one that I think is the gold standard. Y'all know this one, Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon. I don't need to say who it was. I didn't even need to say the title. We all know just by looking at the cover what this is, and it is glorious. It has definitely just really done well. 1973, it has stood the test of time, a cold stone classic. And now I want to talk about a couple of albums that came out in the 70s. A huge trend became live albums. Kiss had their album Alive that came out in 1975. It was a huge success for Kiss. They just on that album alone saved their record label Casablanca from bankruptcy, and they made their name a household name. It's still a household name. Kiss has just lived on forever. But in 1976, a year after Kiss put out their live album, came an album that took the world by storm. Peter Frampton, Frampton Comes Alive. This was a really great record. The best record for Peter Frampton. He was from the band Humble Pie. This was his solo album that came out. Sold 6 million copies. Baby I Love Your Way and Show Me the Way went on to be huge hits that I appreciate now more than I did back at the time. This is a really good record, and I think Peter Frampton's guitar playing is fabulous on here. And for me, he introduced what was called the talk box, which other bands have also went on to do, bands like Bon Jovi. I think this is a really great record. And sadly for Peter Frampton, this was his best. He sold 6 million copies, the best he ever did. He didn't go on and do something even bigger and better. This was as good as it got for him. But man, what a great record to have. And 2 years later, Cheap Trick's Live at Budokan just went on to do huge numbers. It wasn't as big as Frampton Comes Alive. It sold 3 million copies. But it launched their career and helped them do even bigger and better things like Dream Police and so many other wonderful records. So where Peter Frampton had that huge hit, this one was huge, but they went on to build upon this album, and some of their other records also left a huge mark. So I love Cheap Trick's Live at Budokan. I don't know which one I like better. I don't know. I think this one maybe a little bit. But as far as Cheap Trick, the band, I obviously love them more. So that was a really great record. Now I want to talk about an 80s cultural phenomenon that, for me, hasn't held up as well. I'm talking about Madonna and the album Like a Virgin. She had another record that came out that was really good, but this one was her breakthrough album. And the songs like Material Girl and Like a Virgin were huge hits. 80s pop for me hasn't held up as well as classical rock. But you know, I'm not going to put her down, man. She was great. And she went on to have other albums that were really huge. And what's really funny about Madonna is when I was 20 years old, I was working at a bank. I was the drive-through teller. Every single day when I was waiting on a customer, they drive up and they go, wow, you look just like Madonna. So we must have had something in common at the time. And Like a Virgin, it's just not a record I grab that often, but I appreciate who she was, the strong appeal she had for the 80s. It's just, for me, 80s pop music is sentimental and nostalgic, but maybe not as good as, it just hasn't held up as well, I guess is the best way to put it. Now I want to talk about another cultural phenomenon, and 1982, Michael Jackson's Thriller came onto the scene and lasted forever. Michael Jackson had a huge impact, and right when his popularity and that album was slowly starting to die down, poof, we had another huge album that rocked our worlds. And I'm talking about Prince and the Revolution's Purple Rain. The album was a huge smash. There was a movie that came out as well that was a really big movie. This still holds up for me. Purple Rain is a beautiful song, and When Doves Cry, I mean, that very beginning, whatever he is doing on the guitar, I can't even imagine. It's so mind-blowing. But Prince is in the top 5 best guitar players for me, my favorites. Maybe not the best, my favorites. But this album is still really good. Is it my favorite Prince album? It's one of them, definitely, but maybe not my very favorite. But I think this is still really great. It was a culturally big album, and I still really enjoy it today. Now I want to discuss a couple of albums that I think we could say were some of the best debut albums of all time. Definitely the band could never top what they did. These records left a huge imprint, and let me just show this one. We're going to disagree on this. Boston's debut album. So many of you are so fatigued with this. I don't agree. It still rocks for me. It, for me, is the best debut album of all time. I love the whole entire album. More Than the Feeling will never get old for me. It is what I think is the perfect song. It's the perfect song. It's got everything. The best vocals, the best guitar. It's just an incredible song, and this album is an incredible one that I think still holds up. Here is another one. Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction. And I still think this is the album that when Guns N' Roses goes out in concert, this is the one that fills the seats. If they didn't have Appetite for Destruction, they would not have the career that they've had. And I'll be honest with you, Paradise City and Sweet Child of Mine, I'm getting a little tired of them, but I never get tired of Welcome to the Jungle. And I love every song on here. This is killer. It has held up. It is one of the greatest of the 80s. This next record is one that is by a band that has left a huge cultural mark. We've got the Beatles, we've got the Stones, we've got Pink Floyd. And what else? We've got Led Zeppelin. And Led Zeppelin 4 definitely left its cultural mark. It is a huge favorite. Stairway to Heaven. Huge. I mean, even though some of us are a little tired of it, I do find myself a little fatigued from that song. But this album as a whole is killer. It may not be everybody's favorite Led Zeppelin album, but we have to say this is probably their most commercial, their most popular, and it's a great, great record. And now I want to discuss an artist that I think has just aged beautifully. It was a band, but she was the lead singer, and she was able to put rock and punk and reggae and just mix everything, even a little bit of rap And I'm talking about Blondie. This album, Parallel Lines, was huge for her with the song Heart of Glass. Put a little disco in there. And I love disco, so that doesn't bother me at all. She had punk, reggae, just all kinds of different musical elements in her music. And the band Blondie left a huge cultural impact. I love Blondie. I looked up to her as a kid. I loved her. So I think this one has aged like a fine wine, beautiful stone cold classic, Blondie. And she had a huge impact on the 70s. Now I'm going to talk about a couple of 70s soundtracks that sold a gazillion copies. Have they aged well? I don't know about that. Let me just show you this one. Grease. This is Olivia Newton-John and John Travolta. This is my original copy that I had. If you can see very carefully, it says Melinda on here. My mom put that on there. I don't know if you can see that or not. But I took this one to school with me and we played it a lot. The song Grease Lightning, I can still have really good memories of me and my friends at school standing up doing that whole, thing where we do the grease lightning, oh, grease lightning. And I still love the song Hopelessly Devoted to You. And a lot of these songs are a look back at the 50s. But you know what? This is not an album that I put on very often. I have wonderful memories of the movie. My mom took me to see it at the drive-in. And I do like this. Has it aged well? I don't know. I don't think so. I just don't think it, stands up to Led Zeppelin or Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. It's a cultural phenomenon and I appreciate it. But no, I don't think it's held up as well. And I know a lot of you are not going to be very happy for me saying that. Same goes for Saturday Night Fever. Don't get me wrong. I love disco music. A lot of you don't like it. I love it. I think this is a really good album. I love the music of the Bee Gees on here. It's not a stone cold classic like so many others, but I still think it's important. I understand why it sold a gazillion copies. I like it. I don't love it, but I like it. I like it a little bit better than Grease, even if I am admitting the truth. So that's another one that I probably don't think has aged well. Now I'm going to talk about someone who sold a gazillion records, won a gazillion Grammys, and yet when you are sitting around with your friends and you're discussing bands like Van Halen and Kiss and Led Zeppelin and the Beatles and Rolling Stones, no one ever jumps up and says, and how about Christopher Cross? It never happens, and you know it. But yet, this was a huge phenomenon. A Grammy-winning album with the song Sailing on here. Sold a ton of records. And don't get me wrong, you guys. I love Christopher Cross. I think he's fantastic. This is a beautiful sounding record, by the way, and I highly recommend that you have it in your collection. But are you going to grab onto it the way you do Led Zeppelin or Pink Floyd? I mean, come on, you guys, you know better. You know you're not talking about Christopher Cross in the same way you talk about the Beatles or Rolling Stones or any of those others. He was huge for its time. Has it aged well? Probably not. I now want to talk about the biggest selling record of all time. Nothing's bigger than this one, except I have a little bit of a beef with it. Let me talk about this one. This is a greatest hits record. The Eagles, and this is their greatest hits. And you know what? They went on and had a humongous career. A few songs get a little old for me, but Hotel California, I still love it. Life in the Fast Lane is still tremendous. Desperado, Tequila Sunrise, they're beautiful songs. This is the best-selling record of all time, but it is a greatest hits compilation. So to me, Having Michael Jackson's Thriller at number 2 as a studio album says more about Michael Jackson's Thriller. I still think that one is the best. Do I listen to this one when I am out relaxing by the fireplace? You bet I do. This is a great record, historically very important, and the Eagles are a cultural phenomenon. And now let me discuss the biggest and baddest record of all time. Drumroll, please. This one had the biggest impact on our culture. I'm so jealous I wasn't around to see this. And I'm showing Meet the Beatles. And yes, I understand With the Beatles was the UK version, but let's face it, had the Beatles not made it big in America, they wouldn't have had the big cultural phenomenon that they ended up having. Of course, this is a huge album, hugest cultural impact. Wouldn't you agree? The song I Want to Hold Your Hand, I still think it's so beautiful and sweet and cool. Has this album aged well? For me, I like Abbey Road, Revolver, Magical Mystery Tour better. I think they still sound fresh. When I hear this one, I can hear early 60s in it. It's dated, but you cannot deny the cultural impact. And are the songs really cool? Heck yeah. Every song on here is still amazing. So that is my video about the albums that left the biggest cultural impact. Which ones have aged better than others? Leave your comments below. I'm curious to hear which ones you would have added to this or what you agree or disagree with. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe. Take care. Bye-bye.